Be inspired. Get motivated. Creative. And believe that you can achieve whatever your goals may be. Join me, Karen Kelly, each Tuesday for Authors and More, with amazing guests sharing their journey to help get you where you need to be. Hi guys, welcome to the show Authors and More, and I've got a fantastic guest on today. His name is Desmond Burke-Kennedy, but we're going to call him Des because he's such a Des. And we're going to call it's all about his book, which is Murder, Mutiny and the Mugglins, which is a true 18th century saga based off the coast of Ireland. So I'd like to welcome Des Burke-Kennedy. I think he's there. Hi, Des.
Yes, I am. Can we hear each other?
Hello. So how are you doing?
Thank
Great
you.
to see you.
Very good, Karen. Really looking forward to this. It's a grey, miserable day here, but this will be the highlight of the day.
It will be. So tell us all, for our audience, where are you based? Where are you at the moment?
I'm in a place called Dalkey, which is south of Dublin in Ireland, right on the coast. And if I look out the window here, I can see a couple of islands outside the window, some boats in the bay, and it hasn't changed much in the last 6,000 years.
Wow, fantastic. We're here today to talk about your fabulous book, which I have a copy of it here for our viewers, and it's called Murder, Mutiny and the Mugglins. So this is a true 18th century saga, and it's based on a family story from the 1760s, isn't it? When pirates made an enormous impact on the international trade. So where did your interest come, and why this type of genre? Why this story?
Well, it all started, Karen, about 20 years ago, and I came across a little booklet, this little tiny thing here, and they are the notes of a lecture given by a man called Padraig Laffan. And on the title, it says 18th Century Pirates and the Mugglins. And I was intrigued by this, and that stuck in my brain. And the book emerged from deciding at one stage to go back and do research on that and see was there any story behind it. And I was astounded at the story that we discovered through research.
And you had this idea in your head, like I say, for 20 years before you actually started writing it. But you went far and wide to do the research for this book, didn't you?
Yes, Karen, I suppose in writing about anybody, and in this case, it's a man called Captain George Glass, I was really interested to walk in his footsteps and see when he was growing up, what was he looking at? What was the area like? What was the environment like? So that then when I was writing about his life, it all made a bit more sense. So I went to Dundee in Scotland and over to Edinburgh in Scotland. And then we did some research in the Canary Islands as well. But all of those things gave me a real sense of what was in his life when he began his extraordinary journey.
And it is a true story. And first of all, before we talk more about George Glass, is this image on the front. I'm not sure if everybody can see that. And you can see an island there, and that's called the Mugglins. And you can see there's two bodies there hanging. Now, this is your view from your house, isn't it?
It's right out there, Karen.
However, it is the view from your house, but those bodies, thank goodness, have gone now, haven't they? And this is the view that you've got now. It's been replaced by, I'm not very good at showing you, been replaced by a lighthouse, hasn't it? So when were those bodies removed? When were they taken away?
Well, it's a long story, I suppose, but just skipping through a part of the story, 4 men were hung for murder. And the murder is part of the mutiny story that I'm telling. And their punishment was, apart from being hung, when the bodies were taken down, they were wrapped in sackcloth, and the sackcloth was tarred, and they were hung on poles on each side of the River Liffey in Dublin, 2 on each side, so that all the ships going in between could see these 2 horrible things, and they would be reminded that that's what happened to pirates. So he didn't want to be a pirate. But after a while, the locals on one side of the river got a bit fed up watching these bodies dangling in the wind. And I'd say it was a bit pongy also. So they told the authorities they wanted them removed. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the authorities took them down. They put them in a horse and cart. They went from the center of Dublin, which in those days would have been about an hour on a horse and cart. They took them out along the coast, and eventually they arrived at a little inlet just beyond my house. And beyond the inlet are two islands. One of them is Dalkey Island, which goes back over 6,000 years. And beyond that is a place called the Muglins. Now, the Muglins, if you can imagine, is a very large rock sticking out of the sea. It's not that far away from the coast, but 13 different ships have been sunk on that rock, and that's it. And they're the two bodies. Now, they wouldn't have lasted very long because in the winter we get very strong southeasterlies, and there are lots of hungry seagulls and seals and other things around here. So I would reckon they probably didn't last more than 6 or 9 months.
No, I would have thought. So it's a really interesting tale. I started reading the book a couple of weeks ago. I haven't finished it yet. But tell us all about, is it George Glass? Or you said George Glass, didn't you?
Yes, it's glass as in tumbler, a glass, yeah.
Yeah, so George Glass. And he really should have followed in his father's footsteps, who was a minister or similar, but he didn't. He moved into a different direction. To tell us all about the story and about George Glass and what people can expect from this story.
Okay, very quickly, it's a family story. And George, as a young man, was growing up in this very austere family background in the city of Dundee, which is on the east coast of Scotland, a beautiful place. And Dundee, when he was young, would have seen whalers coming in from both Antarctica, and in fact, from all parts of this region, from the Atlantic. He would also have seen the huge demand there was in those days for tarpaulins and ropes. And as it turned out, Dundee was a manufacturer of ropes. Now, some of these ropes on large ships were as thick as your arm, huge ropes. Now, you and I would think, okay, you can walk into a shop and you can order, say, a 10-foot rope, a 3-meter rope. In those days, and the machines are still in Dundee. I actually visited them. They were very like knitting machines, and they knitted the rope on a system very like knitting. But what they did was they opened the back door of the factory, and the rope ran out the back door and down the street and to the next street until they reached the length that they wanted it to be, and then somebody cut it at that point. So it must have been quite a sight. So young George, from a very religious background, would have been stepping over these ropes. He would have seen these exotic ships coming in from all over the world, sailors with earrings and tattoos. And he decided that the church was not for him. He was going to go to sea.
Yeah, he wanted a piece of that, didn't he? And I found that really fascinating about the ropes. Could you imagine open your front door and you trip over this rope? I mean, they went on for miles, for a long distance, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you think of all of the stories you'd have in your mind about the Wild West, caravans going across from the east of the United States out to the west coast, and you'll always see a big tarpaulin over the top. Most of those would have come from Dundee. And of course, every ship before they had engines was covered in ropes of one kind or another. So this was a huge business in Dundee. So George would have seen this exotic business going on and people from all over the world. And that's why he decided he was going to go to sea.
Yeah. But he was a surgeon, wasn't he? And back in that era, was it barbers were surgeons as well, and they did all sorts of procedures like dentistry, didn't they? So George Glass moved into that sort of industry, didn't he?
Now that was before anesthetics, so you can imagine what it was like. The barbers started by healing cuts and things like that, but the surgeons emerged from the barber class, and then they became very offended later on by being called barbers or associated with them. So they became an independent body. And some of the first surgeon qualifications were actually in Edinburgh and here in Dublin. And both of our cities were renowned for surgery. So that goes way back. So once he went to sea, he had a qualification then. Now, it was probably through an apprenticeship, because I've searched the universities and they can't find a record of him. But at that time, the records were not great. So when he went to sea, having served his apprenticeship, he immediately would have had officer class being a surgeon. So this helped him to learn a lot about the sea without the drudgery, because it was a really cruel place. If you committed a murder, for instance, and went to court, one of the punishments was they'll send you to sea instead of going to jail. It was that harsh. Your life at sea life expectancy was about 40 years of age. It was a tough world.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so then he took his family with him on this particular expedition, didn't he? He took his wife and his daughter.
Well, now you're skipping into halfway through the book, because before he did that,
I'm very good at that.
he had discovered, Karen, that he could make a fortune if he could establish a harbour of his own, which would be a trading post. And when I say a fortune, like a huge fortune. So when he was at sea, he became a privateer, which was a trading ship with guns on board. And he learned very quickly that if there's an innocent Spanish or a French ship coming back from the Caribbean, loaded down with gold and silver, if he had more guns than they did, as he did, he basically became a pirate, although they called them privateers. And he made quite a large fortune before he was, about 24 or 5. And then he discovered a special area on the west coast of Africa. And this was an area where it was dangerous, but he figured this was the ideal place to build his own fort, his own harbor, and set up a large trading base. And he knew he would make millions if he did that. So what he had to do was go to the place, do some drawings, and then get permission from His Majesty back in England, going through the House of Parliament, to establish this harbor. So when he went back then to stake his claim and to get the signature of the local chief, he brought his wife and 10-year-old daughter with him, which was quite extraordinary for those days.
Yeah, and reading it, it's not pleasant what happened to them, is it, in the story? But I know we haven't got enough time to cover the whole story, but basically all about his travels and piracy. And how I loved your description last time we spoke was how easily we make one transaction in a bank to another person. But obviously back then, they were making these transactions via ship, weren't they?
Absolutely, Karen. Most of the gold and silver was coming from South America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. And these pirates were no dummies. In fact, a lot of them were much smarter than many people back in port, because they developed their own rules on board ship. They were very democratic. Every person on the ship, for instance, in those piracy days, had a fixed share of the treasure. So they knew if they got that big ship, you'd get 10%, you'd get 5%. They even had a system where if you lost fingers or an arm, you got compensated for that. But you're quite right, where you and I would use a bank card or whatever. In those days, if you had a fortune in gold or silver or jewelry or whatever, it had to be moved by ship from one place to the other. And this is where the privateers became pirates, and this was where they made their fortunes, by robbing those ships. It wasn't a nice world, and these Hollywood visions we have of pirates, they were murderers in the main.
Captain Jack Sparrow comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, recently, we watched a film again. Is it Captain Phillips? It's an old film. Well, not that old, but that's, it still happens today, doesn't it? We still have a lot of pirates now committing terrible offences now and trying to get on board ships and cause havoc.
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing that enthralled me about George Glass. Coming from a kind of a humble background in Dundee, he was very well educated, trained himself as a surgeon. He at one time was in the Canary Islands, and he wrote a book in 1765, and it was actually published here in Dublin in 1767. And would you believe it?
You've got it there, haven't you? Part of your research. Wow, look at that book. Here.
That is it. 1767. Wow. It's just amazing. But the fascinating thing about the book was that within 12 months of his death, this book was published in Dublin. And if I go in a few pages, the first part of it says, a short account of the life of George Glass. So this added to the earlier piece of research I had. It was just a piece of gold. And now I had to have the book rebuilt. We have an antiquarian bookbinder in Dublin, and he put the whole thing together. It came in a box full of pages and must and whatever, but it's a piece of treasure.
Oh, that really is. You really are passionate about this story. Well, Des, we're going to take a commercial break and we'll continue talking about George Glass on our return.
Lovely.
If a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Have you ever felt that your voice goes unheard? And you think that you can make a difference if only someone would listen. It's time for women in business to have a place to step into your power, a platform to embrace your hopes, dreams, and your visions, a voice to heal and restore. Your voice can make a difference. We have a platform you deserve to share your story and let your voice be heard. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself the chance to be heard and shine bright. Contact New Dawn Media by texting CAFE to 55312. That's CAFE to 55312. Or call us at 866-224-5422. Your voice can make a difference.
Hi, I'm Tracy McDonough, owner and founder of Healing Moments. Healing Moments is a healing playroom, a mind, body, spirit center. Our service is love and compassion, and the environment is soothing, peaceful, and inviting. Every area is designed for healing and peace. We deliver services such as massage therapy or lymphatic drainage, energy healing and Reiki, chakra balancing, physical vascular therapy for circulation and pain, vibrational medicine using frequencies and oils, and music in order to calm and relax your mind, body, and spirit. We also offer detoxification services using infrared sauna, ionic foot baths, and power plates. All of our modalities are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, induce relaxation, relieve pain, and provide detoxification and inflammation reduction for optimal healing and wellness.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Authors and More, where I'm talking to Des. And welcome back, Des.
You know, in our little chat so far, I haven't mentioned the brave woman behind George Glass. And it's a fascinating story when you think, we mentioned West Africa, and he went down to West Africa, found this beautiful